Ethan Brooks never believed in fate, until the woman at his door told him he'd saved her life. He was a widower who'd spent 6 years building walls around his heart, a single father who kissed his son goodnight and locked the world out every evening. Love wasn't on his agenda. Hell, it wasn't even in his vocabulary anymore. But when Arya Chen looked him in the eye and whispered, "You're the reason I'm still breathing," everything he thought he knew began to crack. Sometimes the people we save end up rescuing us right back. If you're watching from halfway across the world or right down the street, drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's get started. Ethan Brooks had never been the kind of man who did things halfway. Not with work, not with raising Noah, and definitely not with the promises he'd made to himself after Lauren died. That promise was simple: keep your head down, stay focused, and don't let anyone close enough to hurt you again. It had worked for 6 years. He parked his SUV in the driveway and cut the engine, sitting in silence for a moment longer than necessary. The house looked the same as it always did: clean lawn, shutters painted navy blue, basketball hoop Noah never used mounted above the garage. Lauren had picked that hoop out, said every kid needed one, even if they never touched it. Ethan hadn't taken it down. He told himself it was for Noah, for when the kid eventually showed interest in sports, but the truth was simpler and harder to admit. Taking it down felt like erasing her, and he wasn't ready for that. Probably never would be. He grabbed his phone from the cup holder and scrolled through the messages he'd been ignoring all afternoon. Most were work emails, client updates, project timelines, the usual corporate noise that filled his days. One was from his sister, Caroline. "Caroline, don't bail on me, Ethan. She's nice, just coffee. 1 hour. He exhaled through his nose and typed back. "Ethan, I didn't agree to this." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Caroline, you didn't say no either." 4 p.m., your place. I already gave her the address." "Jesus Christ," he muttered, tossing the phone onto the passenger seat. Caroline had been relentless lately, more persistent than usual about getting him back out there, as she called it. She meant well, she always did, but she didn't understand that some doors, once closed, were better left that way. He'd tried explaining it once, over Thanksgiving dinner last year, after she'd made some pointed comment about him wasting his life in mourning. He'd told her it wasn't mourning anymore. It was just how things were. She'd looked at him like he was lying to himself. Maybe he was. Inside, the house smelled faintly of the lemon cleaner he'd used that morning. Everything was in its place. Shoes lined up by the door, mail sorted on the hall table, not a dish in the sink. Control was important. Structure mattered. It was how he'd survived the last 6 years, how he'd managed to be both mother and father to a boy who barely remembered the woman who'd given birth to him. Noah's backpack sat by the stairs, unzipped, a crumpled math worksheet sticking out of the top. Ethan picked it up, smoothed it out with careful fingers, and tucked it back inside. The kid was brilliant when he focused, could do calculations in his head that impressed his teachers. But focus wasn't exactly Noah's strong suit these days. Too much energy, too many thoughts bouncing around in that 7-year-old brain. He checked his watch, 3:47 p.m. 13 minutes until a stranger showed up at his door for a casual coffee he hadn't asked for. He went upstairs, splashed cold water on his face, stared at himself in the mirror for a moment too long. The lines around his eyes had gotten deeper in the past year. 32, and he looked 40. He changed into a clean shirt, nothing fancy, just a gray Henley that didn't have coffee stains on the sleeve or Noah's fingerprints on the hem, and came back down. He thought about making coffee, decided against it because that felt too formal, then changed his mind and put a pot on anyway because having something to do with his hands might make this bearable. If this woman, whoever she was, expected some kind of elaborate setup, she was going to be disappointed. This wasn't a date. It was a favor to his sister. An hour of polite conversation, maybe 2 if it went well, then done. Back to normal. Back to safe. The doorbell rang at exactly 4 p.m. Ethan wiped his hands on a dish towel and walked to the front door, already rehearsing his exit strategy. "Thanks for coming by." "It was nice meeting you. I'll tell Caroline we gave it a shot." Simple, clean, no hurt feelings. He opened the door. The woman standing on his porch was younger than he expected, mid-20s maybe, with dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail that fell over one shoulder and eyes that were too steady, too focused, like she was looking through him instead of at him. She wore jeans and a cream-colored sweater, Nothing flashy or trying too hard. But there was something about the way she stood there, one hand gripping the strap of her canvas bag, shoulders straight despite what looked like nerves, that made him pause. She wasn't what he'd expected. Caroline usually set him up with women closer to his age, women with similar life experiences, safe choices. This woman was different. "Ethan Brooks?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but clear. Not nervous exactly, just certain, like she already knew the answer. "Yeah," he said. "You must be—" "Arya," she said quickly. Then her eyes dropped, scanning him in a way that made him suddenly self-conscious. Her gaze landed on his left wrist, visible below the rolled sleeve of his Henley, and something shifted in her expression. "You have a scar." He blinked, thrown off balance. "What? On your wrist?" "A scar. Curved, about 2 inches long." She said it like she'd been looking for it, like it confirmed something she'd already suspected. Ethan glanced down instinctively. The scar was there, faint but visible, cutting across the inside of his wrist like a pale crescent moon. He'd gotten it years ago, when he couldn't even remember. Some accident in college, maybe? A slip with a kitchen knife, or catching himself on something sharp. It had never seemed important enough to remember the details. "Yeah," he said slowly, looking back up at her. "So?" Arya's expression shifted, something between relief and disbelief washing over her features, her eyes going bright, almost glassy. "It's you." "I'm sorry?" "You saved my life." Ethan stared at her. For a long moment, he didn't say anything because he genuinely couldn't tell if she was serious or if Caroline had set him up with someone who'd watched too many romantic dramas and confused fiction with reality. This wasn't how blind dates started. This wasn't how anything started. "I think you've got the wrong person," he said finally, keeping his voice even, polite. "I don't." She said it with absolute certainty, no hesitation, and took a half step forward like she wanted to reach out and touch him but thought better of it. 7 years ago, you were a donor, bone marrow. I was 18, acute leukemia. The registry matched us, and you— She stopped, her voice catching just slightly, and Ethan saw her throat work as she swallowed. "You didn't hesitate. They told me that. You went through the whole procedure without asking questions, without wanting anything in return, without even knowing who I was. You saved my life, and I never got to say thank you." Ethan's mind went blank, then too full all at once, memories flooding back that he'd buried under years of other priorities. Bone marrow donation, 7 years ago. He had done that. He remembered it vaguely now, some registry he'd signed up for in college, back when he still thought he could make a difference in the world, when he'd believed in things like random acts of kindness and paying it forward. They'd called him out of the blue one day, told him he was a match for someone critically ill, asked if he'd be willing to donate. The process would be uncomfortable, they'd warned, time-consuming. There would be needles and recovery time and no guarantee it would even work. He'd said yes anyway. It had seemed like the right thing to do, the obvious choice. He hadn't thought about it since. Life had moved on. He'd graduated, married Lauren, started a career, had Noah. The donation had been filed away as just another thing that had happened once. "I didn't know who you were," he said quietly, his voice rougher than he intended. "They don't tell you that. It's anonymous." "I know." Arya's eyes were bright now, glassy in a way that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. "But I found you." "How?" "It took a while. Years, actually. I had to dig through hospital records, cross-reference donation dates, track down a few people who remembered details they probably shouldn't have shared. She paused, a small, self-deprecating smile crossing her face. "I'm persistent when I want to be." Ethan didn't know what to say. This wasn't in any playbook he had. This wasn't how blind dates were supposed to go. This wasn't how anything was supposed to go. He stood there, one hand still on the doorframe, trying to process what she'd just told him, trying to reconcile the stranger on his porch with the abstract concept of someone whose life he'd saved without ever knowing their name. Before he could figure out a response that made any kind of sense, his phone buzzed in his pocket, loud in the silence between them. He pulled it out, saw the school's number on the screen, and felt his stomach drop the way it always did when they called during school hours. "I have to take this," he said, already stepping back from the door. "Of course." Arya moved aside, giving him space. He answered, pressing the phone to his ear. "This is Ethan Brooks." "Mr. Brooks? This is Principal Callahan. There's been a small incident with Noah." "Nothing serious," she added quickly, probably reading the panic in his silence. "But we'd like you to come pick him up." "What happened?" "He had a bit of a fall during recess. He's fine, just shaken up and scraped his knee pretty badly. We've got him in the nurse's office with an ice pack, but he's asking for you." Ethan's jaw tightened. Noah had always been clumsy, too much energy packed into a small body, not enough caution to balance it out. But he was also tough. Didn't cry over every little thing. If the school had called, it meant something had rattled him, and that was enough to make Ethan's protective instincts kick into overdrive. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up, already grabbing his keys from the hook by the door, his mind shifting gears completely. When he turned back, Arya was still standing there, watching him with that same unreadable expression, and he remembered suddenly that this was supposed to be a date, that he had a stranger in his house, that he was about to abandon her without explanation. "I have to go," he said. "My son, is he okay?" The concern in her voice sounded genuine, immediate. "I don't know. They said he fell, scraped his knee, but they want me to pick him up." Arya nodded, already adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder. "Of course. You should go." "Yeah." He paused, feeling like he should say something else, offer some kind of apology or explanation, but the words wouldn't come. His son needed him. That was all that mattered. Arya did something he didn't expect then. She stepped forward, her expression shifting from understanding to something more determined. "Let me come with you." "What? No, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to, but you're clearly stressed and I'm already here, and maybe an extra set of hands will help. Or at least make the drive less awful. You look like you're about to crawl out of your skin." Ethan hesitated. Every instinct told him to say no. To keep this woman, this stranger, who somehow wasn't a stranger, who'd tracked him down across years and hospital records for reasons he still didn't fully understand, at arm's length. This was his life, his son, his responsibility. But the clock was ticking, and Noah was waiting, and he didn't have time to argue or think it through, or do anything except make a decision. "Fine," he said. "But we're leaving now." "I'm ready." They were in the car 30 seconds later, Ethan's hands tight on the wheel as he backed out of the driveway faster than he should have. Arya buckled herself in without comment, her bag on her lap, and had the sense not to try to make conversation when his entire focus was on getting to the school as quickly as possible. The drive to the school was tense and quiet, the kind of silence that felt full of unspoken things. Ethan kept both hands on the wheel, his knuckles white, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios, even though he knew he was probably overreacting. Noah was fine. The principal had said so. Just a scrape, just shaken up. But his brain wouldn't stop conjuring images of broken bones and concussions, and all the terrible things that could happen to a 7-year-old on a playground. Arya sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, saying nothing. She looked out the window, giving him space, and Ethan appreciated that more than he'd admit. Some people felt the need to fill every silence with noise, with empty reassurances or pointless questions, but she just sat there, present but not intrusive. It was unexpected, comfortable even, in a way that didn't make sense given they'd met all of 10 minutes ago. When they pulled into the school parking lot, he was out of the car before the engine fully stopped, his door slamming shut with more force than necessary. Arya followed a few steps behind, not pushing, not trying to keep up, just there. He appreciated that too, though he wasn't sure why it mattered. Inside, the school smelled like antiseptic and old carpet, and that specific scent of industrial cleaner that all schools seem to use. The hallways were empty, classes still in session, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead in that way that always gave him a headache. He found the front desk and gave Noah's name to the secretary, who directed him to the nurse's office on the second floor. When he found the room, the door was already open. Noah sat on the examination table, his left knee wrapped in a clean white bandage, his face blotchy and red from crying, though the tears had stopped. The moment he saw Ethan, his bottom lip started trembling again, and Ethan felt something crack in his chest. "Dad." Ethan was across the room in 2 strides, crouching down in front of him so they were at eye level. He put his hands on Noah's shoulders, gentle but firm. "Hey buddy, you okay?" Noah nodded, then shook his head, then nodded again, like he couldn't quite decide. I fell off the slide. It was stupid. You're not stupid. Accidents happen. My knee really hurts. I know. Let me see. The nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that reminded Ethan of his own mother, stepped forward. It's just a scrape, Mr. Brooks. A bad one, but nothing serious. We cleaned it up, put some antibacterial ointment on it, wrapped it to keep it clean. He'll be sore for a day or two, but he's fine. Might have a scar, but kids heal fast. Ethan exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just a fraction. Thanks. Of course. He's a tough kid. Didn't cry until he was sitting down, and even then he was more embarrassed than hurt. Noah's eyes drifted past Ethan then, landing on Arya, who stood near the doorway with her hands still folded, her expression soft and open. Who's that? Ethan glanced back, having almost forgotten she was there. That's a friend. Her name's Arya. Arya stepped forward, offering Noah a small, genuine smile. Hi, Noah. That's a pretty impressive bandage you've got there. Noah sniffled, wiping his nose with the back of his hand in a way that would normally make Ethan remind him to use a tissue. It's not that cool. Are you kidding? When I was your age, I would have shown that thing off to everyone. Battle scars are the best kind of scars. They come with stories. Despite himself, despite the pain and the embarrassment, Noah's mouth twitched into something that might have been a smile. Really? Really? Plus, you've got a great story now. I conquered the slide. That's solid. Very heroic. Ethan watched the exchange, something unfamiliar twisting in his chest. Arya wasn't trying too hard, wasn't using that overly sweet talking down voice people sometimes used with kids they didn't know. She was just talking to him. Like he was a person whose feelings mattered, whose experience was valid. It was such a small thing, but it made something in Ethan soften despite himself. Can you walk? Ethan asked, turning his attention back to his son. Yeah, it just stings when I bend it. All right, let's get you home. Thank the nurse. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. You're welcome, sweetheart. Take it easy for a few days, okay? They made it to the car without incident, Noah moving slowly but managing on his own, Ethan hovering close with one hand near his back, ready to catch him if he wobbled. Arya had offered to sit in the back with Noah, but Ethan had waved her off. He didn't want to make this weirder than it already was, didn't want Noah getting too curious about who this woman was and why she was suddenly part of their afternoon. On the ride back, Noah sat in the back seat, quieter than usual, his forehead pressed against the window as he watched the familiar streets pass by. Ethan caught his eye in the rearview mirror every few seconds, checking, making sure he was okay. You hungry? Ethan asked. Kinda. What do you want? Pizza. Ethan almost smiled. Of course pizza. It was always pizza. Pizza it is. Arya turned slightly in her seat, glancing back at Noah. Do you like pepperoni, or are you one of those pineapple people? Noah wrinkled his nose in immediate disgust. Pineapple's gross. Thank you. Finally, someone with sense. Dad likes it, though. Arya glanced at Ethan, one eyebrow raised in mock judgment. Really? Don't start, Ethan muttered, fighting back a smile. I'm not starting anything. I'm just processing this information. Pineapple on pizza is objectively wrong. It's fruit. It doesn't belong on pizza. Tomato's a fruit. That's different. How? Ethan didn't answer, but he could feel the corner of his mouth threatening to twitch upward, and he refused to give her the satisfaction. In the back seat, Noah giggled, and some of the tension from the past hour started to dissolve. By the time they pulled into the driveway, the atmosphere in the car had shifted from stress to something easier, something Ethan didn't have a name for, but that felt like relief mixed with something warmer. Noah hobbled inside, heading straight for the couch with the determination of a kid who knew exactly where he wanted to be, and Ethan followed, already pulling out his phone to order food. Arya lingered near the doorway, like she wasn't sure if she was supposed to stay or go, if her role in whatever this was had ended. You can sit, Ethan said without looking up from his phone, scrolling through the pizza place's menu. You sure? Yeah, pizza'll be here in 20. She sat, choosing the armchair rather than the couch, giving Noah space, and Ethan noticed that too. Little things, thoughtful things, things that suggested she was paying attention in ways most people didn't bother to. The pizza arrived right on time. 2 large boxes, one pepperoni, and one with the controversial pineapple that Ethan refused to apologize for. He paid, tipped well because he always did, and brought the boxes inside, setting them on the coffee table. Noah perked up immediately, his injury temporarily forgotten in the face of cheese and carbs, and grabbed a slice before Ethan could even open the second box. "Slow down," Ethan said, settling onto the couch next to him. "You're gonna choke." "I'm fine." "You say that a lot." "Because it's true." Arya took a slice from the pepperoni box, folding it in half the way New Yorkers did before taking a bite, and Ethan noticed she didn't go for the pineapple. Smart woman. For a while they ate in silence. It wasn't uncomfortable, just quiet. The kind of quiet Ethan had gotten used to over the years, though it felt different with someone else there. Having another adult in the house who wasn't Caroline or one of Noah's friends' parents felt strange. Not bad, just different, new. A break in the routine he'd carefully constructed. "So," Arya said eventually, wiping her hands on a napkin, "you're really good with him." Ethan glanced at Noah, who was halfway through his second slice, tomato sauce smeared across his chin like war paint. "I'm his dad. It's my job." "Still, a lot of people don't do it well. The job, I mean." "Yeah, well." He didn't know how to finish that sentence, so he didn't. Compliments about his parenting always made him uncomfortable, like he was being praised for doing the bare minimum, for being present in his kid's life the way he was supposed to be. Arya studied him for a moment, then looked down at her plate. "I meant what I said earlier about you saving my life. I know it probably seems like ancient history to you, something you did once and moved on from, but it matters. You did something incredible, and you didn't even know who I was. That's rare. You don't have to keep thanking me." "I'm not thanking you. I'm telling you it matters. There's a difference." Ethan set his slice down, suddenly not hungry despite having skipped lunch. It wasn't incredible. It was just the right thing to do. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't have. Most people say they would, but when it comes down to it, when it means time and pain and inconvenience, most people find excuses. You didn't. That matters. He didn't have an answer for that. Didn't know how to explain that he'd never thought of it as a choice, just as the obvious thing to do when someone needed help. Noah looked up from his pizza, glancing between them with the kind of curiosity only kids had, the kind that saw through adult attempts at being subtle. "Did you really save her life, Dad?" Ethan hesitated, searching for the right words, the right way to explain something complicated to a 7-year-old. "It's complicated, Bud." "How?" "I donated something from my body. A long time ago, before you were born. It helped Arya get better when she was really sick." Noah's eyes went wide, the way they always did when he learned something new that seemed impossible. "Like a superhero?" "Nobody, not like that. Just like a person helping another person." "Sounds like a superhero to me," Arya said softly, and there was something in her voice that made Ethan's chest tighten. Ethan shot her a look, but she just smiled, unapologetic. After dinner, Noah's eyelids started drooping, the adrenaline from the afternoon finally wearing off and leaving exhaustion in its wake. Ethan sent him upstairs to brush his teeth and get ready for bed, promising to come up in a few minutes to tuck him in the way he always did. Once Noah's footsteps faded up the stairs, Ethan turned to Arya. "You didn't have to stay." "I know. But you did anyway." "Yeah." She stood, brushing crumbs off her jeans. "I wanted to, and I'm glad I did. Your son's great, really great." "He is. He looks like you. Same eyes, same stubborn chin." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded, feeling awkward in his own living room. Arya grabbed her bag from the chair by the door, slinging it over her shoulder with practiced ease. "I should get going. You've got bedtime routine, and I've probably overstayed my welcome as it is." "Yeah, probably." He didn't mean it the way it sounded, and he could see from her expression that she knew that, but the words had already left his mouth. She paused at the door, one hand on the knob, and turned back to look at him. Her expression was open, vulnerable in a way that made him want to look away. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why didn't you ever try to find out who I was? The person you helped?" Ethan crossed his arms, leaning against the doorframe, putting a physical barrier between them, even though he wasn't sure why he felt the need. "Because it wasn't about me. You needed help. I gave it. That's where it ended."
What if I told you it didn't end there? That it couldn't have ended there?
He met her gaze, and for the first time all evening, he saw something in her eyes that made his chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude or admiration. Something deeper, something that scared the hell out of him because he recognized it, had felt it before, knew exactly where it led. "I'd say you're reading too much into it," he said quietly, his voice rougher than he intended. Arya smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes this time. "Maybe. Or maybe you're not reading enough." She left before he could respond, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that felt heavier than it should have. That night, after Noah was asleep and tucked in tight, after Ethan had read him 2 chapters instead of 1, because the kid had asked and Ethan hadn't had it in him to say no, he sat on the edge of his bed in the dark, staring at the scar on his wrist. He hadn't thought about that donation in years. It had been a blip on his radar, something he'd done because it seemed like the obvious choice, the kind of thing you did when someone's life was on the line. He'd never imagined it would come back to him like this, wrapped up in a woman with steady eyes and a voice that didn't waver, who'd somehow found him across years and bureaucracy and anonymous medical systems. He didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know what to do with her, with the way she'd looked at him, with the implications of her showing up at his door. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking through his thoughts. A text from Caroline. "Caroline. So? How'd it go?" Ethan stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Ethan. It went." 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Caroline. "That's it? That's all I get?" Ethan. "For now." He set the phone down and lay back against the pillows, his mind too full to settle, too many thoughts competing for attention. Somewhere across town, Arya Chen sat in her apartment, staring at the same moon Ethan couldn't see through his closed blinds, wondering if she'd made a mistake showing up like that, laying everything out so openly. She hadn't, but neither of them knew that yet. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of Noah's alarm blaring down the hall at 6:30 a.m. sharp. He rolled out of bed, went through the motions, shower, coffee brewing while he made breakfast, packing Noah's lunch, and tried not to think about the way Arya had looked at him before she left. He failed spectacularly. Noah was unusually quiet over cereal, poking at his Cheerios with a spoon but not eating much, his mind clearly somewhere else. "You feeling okay?" Ethan asked, sitting down across from him with his own bowl. "Yeah." "Knee still hurt?" "A little. Not as bad." "Want to stay home today?" "I can call work, tell them I need to work from home." Noah shook his head quickly. "I'm fine. I don't want to miss art class." "You sure?" "Yeah." Ethan didn't push. If the kid said he was fine, he was probably fine, or at least fine enough to make it through a school day. They drove to school in silence, Noah staring out the window the way he always did in the mornings when he was still waking up, Ethan gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than necessary. When they pulled up to the drop-off zone, Noah unbuckled his seatbelt but didn't immediately jump out of the car like he usually did. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "Is Arya going to come back?" Ethan's hand stilled on the wheel. He looked at his son, saw the genuine curiosity in his eyes, the hope. "I don't know, bud. Why?" "I liked her. She was nice and funny. She didn't treat me like a baby." Something in Ethan's chest cracked just a little, widening a fault line he'd thought was sealed. "Yeah, me too." Noah nodded, absorbing this information the way kids did, filing it away for later processing. Then he grabbed his backpack and slid out of the car, favoring his good leg just slightly. Ethan watched him walk toward the building, watched him wave to a friend, watched him disappear through the front doors, and felt the weight of the question settle over him like a blanket. Is Arya going to come back? He didn't know. But part of him, small, quiet, buried under 6 years of walls and carefully maintained emotional distance, hoped she would. Basham, she did. 3 days later, on a Thursday afternoon when Ethan was in the middle of a tedious work call about budget projections and quarterly targets, his phone rang with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer, almost let it go to voicemail, but something made him mute his work call and pick up. "Hello? Hi, it's Arya." He stood up from his desk immediately, walking away from his laptop and the droning voice of his manager discussing spreadsheets. "Hey, How'd you get this number? Your sister. Of course she did. He could practically hear Caroline's smug satisfaction across the miles. I'm not interrupting, am I? No. Well, yes, but it's fine. Trust me, you're doing me a favor. What's up? There was a pause on the other end, long enough that Ethan thought the call might have dropped. Then Arya spoke, her voice quieter than before, more uncertain. I know this is going to sound strange, but I've been thinking about you and Noah, and I wanted to make sure you guys were okay. Ethan leaned against the wall of his home office, rubbing a hand over his face. We're fine. Good. That's good. Another pause, longer this time, filled with unspoken things. Arya. Yeah? Why'd you really call? She laughed softly, and it sounded almost sad, self-aware in a way that told him she'd been asking herself the same question. Because I can't stop thinking about what you said. That it ended when you donated. I don't think it did, Ethan. I don't think it's supposed to. And I know that probably sounds crazy coming from someone you just met, but it doesn't sound crazy. No? No. He heard her exhale, could picture her sitting somewhere with her phone pressed to her ear, working up the courage to say whatever came next. I wanted you to know that I'm here. If you ever want to talk, or if Noah wants another pizza night, or if you just, I don't know, want company. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling something shift inside him that he wasn't ready to name, wasn't ready to acknowledge. Yeah, I do. You do what? Want company, want to talk, want... He trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence without opening doors he'd spent 6 years keeping shut. Okay, Arya said softly. Then let's do that. Okay. I'll let you get back to work. But Ethan? Yeah? I'm glad you answered. Yeah, me too. She hung up, and Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at his phone, feeling the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself starting to crack. Downstairs, he heard his laptop ping with an unanswered work email. He ignored it. By the end of the week, Ethan had convinced himself he wasn't going to call her. It was safer that way. Easier. Less complicated. He had a good life. Structured, predictable, safe. He had Noah, had his work, had his routine. He didn't need more than that. By Sunday, he'd changed his mind. He picked up the phone, dialed her number before he could talk himself out of it again, and waited, his heart beating harder than it should for such a simple thing. She answered on the second ring. Hi. Hey, he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. You busy? Not really. Why? Noah wants to know if you like mini golf. There was a beat of silence, then a laugh, bright and surprised and completely genuine. Are you asking me out, Ethan Brooks? I'm asking if you want to play mini golf with a 7-year-old who cheats at every game he plays. Does he really cheat? Every single time. It's honestly impressive. Then I'm definitely in. Ethan felt himself smile despite everything. Despite all the reasons, this was probably a bad idea. Good. We'll pick you up in an hour. I'll be ready. He hung up, set the phone down on the kitchen counter, and stared at it for a moment longer, wondering what he was doing, where this was going, if he was ready for any of it. Down the hall, Noah's voice echoed from his room, excited and loud. Dad, did she say yes? Yeah, buddy, she said yes. Yes! The sound of something hitting the floor, probably Noah jumping off his bed in celebration. Ethan shook his head, but the smile didn't fade. It felt good. Terrifying, but good. Maybe Caroline had been right all along. Maybe it was time to stop living like the past was all he had. Maybe, just maybe, there was still something worth fighting for, something worth taking a risk on. He didn't know yet, but he was willing to find out. And that, he realized, was the first real step he'd taken in 6 years. Arya lived in a small apartment complex on the east side of town, the kind with iron railings that needed repainting and a parking lot full of sedans that had seen better days. The building had character, Ethan supposed, if you were generous with the word. Cracked sidewalks, a faded sign that read Riverside Gardens, even though there was no river and definitely no garden. Just a sad patch of grass with a broken sprinkler head sticking out of it. Ethan pulled up to the curb, and Noah practically launched himself out of the back seat before the car had fully stopped, his injured knee apparently forgotten in his excitement. Noah, wait! But the kid was already halfway to the entrance, moving with the kind of energy that made Ethan's earlier concerns about the scraped knee seem ridiculous. 7-year-olds healed fast. Ethan had forgotten that, or maybe he'd just gotten too used to worrying. He caught up just as Noah pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B, his finger jabbing the button twice for good measure. The intercom crackled with static. "That you guys?" "Yeah," Ethan said, leaning closer to the speaker. "Be right down." 30 seconds later, the door swung open and Arya appeared wearing sneakers, dark jeans, and a faded Red Sox t-shirt that looked about 2 sizes too big, the hem falling past her hips. Her hair was down this time, falling past her shoulders in waves that caught the afternoon light, and she had a pair of sunglasses pushed up on top of her head like she'd forgotten they were there. "Nice shirt," Ethan said, nodding at the logo. She glanced down at it, then back up at him with a grin that was equal parts amused and challenging. "What, you a Yankees fan or something?" "I don't really follow baseball. Never had the time." "Good. We can still be friends then. I was worried for a second." Noah tugged on her sleeve, impatient with the adult banter. "Do you know how to play mini golf?" "I'm okay at it. Nothing special." "You?" "I'm really good," Noah announced with the confidence only a 7-year-old could muster. Arya glanced at Ethan, who shook his head slightly, a small warning. She bit back a smile, clearly getting the message. "Well then, I guess you'll have to teach me all your secrets." The drive to the mini golf course took 15 minutes, most of which Noah spent explaining the rules with the kind of elaborate detail that suggested he'd either made half of them up or had seriously misunderstood how the game worked. Arya listened like he was delivering the most important lecture she'd ever heard, nodding seriously and asking clarifying questions that made Noah puff up with pride. "So if the ball goes in the water, you have to start over?" "Exactly. Unless it's your 3rd try, then you just put it near the hole." "That seems fair. Dad says it's cheating, but it's not. It's strategy." Ethan caught Arya's eye in the rearview mirror and saw her fighting not to laugh. He shook his head, but couldn't help the small smile tugging at his mouth. When they arrived, the place was busier than he'd expected. Families everywhere, kids running between obstacles like the course was a playground. Someone's birthday party clustered around the snack bar with balloons tied to the fence, and a cake that was slowly melting in the afternoon heat. The whole scene was chaotic in a way that would normally make Ethan want to leave, but Noah was already unbuckling his seatbelt, practically vibrating with excitement. Ethan paid for 3 rounds at the booth, grabbed 3 putters in different sizes, and a scorecard that Noah immediately claimed, and led them to the first hole, a simple straight shot with a slight incline that shouldn't have been difficult. "Okay," Noah announced, planting his ball on the tee with exaggerated precision, his tongue poking out the corner of his mouth in concentration. "Watch this." He swung. The ball careened off the edge of the ramp at completely the wrong angle, ricocheted off a plastic flamingo that had seen better days, and rolled back to his feet like it was mocking him. Arya pressed her lips together, clearly trying not to laugh. "That was a practice shot," Noah said quickly, his face going red. "Sure it was," Ethan said, keeping his expression neutral. Noah tried again. This time the ball made it halfway up the ramp before rolling back down, somehow ending up farther from the hole than when he started. He frowned, adjusted his stance the way he'd seen someone do on TV once, and hit it a 3rd time with more force. It went wide, bounced off the wall with a loud crack, and somehow ended up in the bushes behind the hole. "This one's broken," Noah muttered, glaring at the flamingo like it was personally responsible. "The hole's not broken, bud." "It's definitely broken. The angle's wrong." Arya stepped up, lining up her shot with a kind of easy confidence that made Ethan raise an eyebrow. She'd said she was okay at this, but the way she held the putter and sized up the course suggested she'd downplayed her skills considerably. She tapped the ball gently, and it rolled up the ramp like it was on rails, curved around the flamingo in a perfect arc, and dropped straight into the hole with a satisfying plunk. Noah's jaw fell open. "No way." "Beginner's luck," Arya said, shrugging like she hadn't just made a shot that looked professionally calculated. "That wasn't beginner's luck. You're like a mini golf ninja." "I've played a few times. Maybe more than a few." Ethan took his turn, sinking it in 2 strokes, and Noah glared at both of them like they'd personally betrayed him and everything he stood for. By the 3rd hole, a windmill obstacle that required timing and patience, neither of which Noah possessed, the kid had abandoned any pretense of playing fair. When he thought no one was looking, he nudged his ball closer to the hole with his foot, then glanced around like a tiny criminal checking for witnesses. Arya noticed immediately, but didn't say anything. She just caught Ethan's eye and smiled, and somehow that silent exchange felt more intimate than any conversation they'd had. "You see that?" Ethan murmured as they moved to the next hole, a castle set up with a drawbridge that went up and down. "See what?" Arya asked, her expression perfectly innocent. "You're really going to play dumb? I have no idea what you're talking about. Your son is a completely honest and rule-following individual." "Right. Although," she added, her voice dropping conspiratorially, "if I were going to cheat, I'd probably do it exactly the way he's doing it. Very efficient." Noah was already teeing up at the castle hole, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd been caught. Ethan shook his head, but couldn't help the grin tugging at his mouth. There was something freeing about being around someone who didn't take everything so seriously, who could find humor in a 7-year-old's terrible cheating skills. Halfway through the course, they stopped for snacks. Noah wanted a slushie the size of his head, blue raspberry because apparently that was the only acceptable flavor, and Ethan didn't have the energy to argue. They sat at one of the picnic tables under a faded umbrella advertising a beer brand Ethan had never heard of, Noah slurping his drink loudly while Arya picked at a basket of fries that were more grease than potato. So, Arya said, glancing at Ethan, "how long have you been doing the single dad thing?" Ethan stiffened slightly, his hand tightening around his water bottle. It was an innocent question, the kind people asked all the time, but it still felt like stepping on glass. 6 years. That's a long time. Yeah. She waited like she expected him to say more. When he didn't, when he just took a long drink of water and stared at the table like it was fascinating, she turned her attention back to the fries. "You're good at it. Really good. Not everyone is." "You said that already." "Because it's true. I've seen a lot of single parents who are barely holding it together. You're not barely holding it together. You don't know that." "I can see it." Noah looked up from his slushie, his lips stained bright blue like he'd been experimenting with alien makeup. "My mom died when I was little." Arya's expression shifted immediately, something softer, sadder, settling over her features. She set down the fry she'd been holding. "I'm sorry, Noah." "It's okay. I don't really remember her. Dad says that's normal." Ethan's chest tightened. He'd heard Noah say that before, had told himself it was better this way, that not remembering meant less pain, but hearing it out loud, hearing his son casually mention the woman who'd given birth to him like she was just a fact instead of a person, it never got easier. "I bet she was amazing," Arya said quietly, her voice careful. "Dad says she was. He has pictures. She had dark hair like me. Then she was definitely amazing. Anyone with dark hair like yours has to be." Noah smiled, pleased with this logic, and went back to his slushie. Arya glanced at Ethan, and for a moment their eyes met. He looked away first, uncomfortable with the understanding he saw there, with the sympathy that wasn't pity, but something gentler. "She was," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "She really was." They finished the course an hour later, making their way through castles and lighthouses, and a pirate ship that had a mechanical kraken that rose out of the water at random intervals and scared the hell out of half the kids on the course. Noah came in dead last, which he blamed entirely on the broken holes and unfair obstacles, and Arya won by a comfortable margin that suggested her "I'm okay at this" comment had been a serious understatement. "You hustled us," Ethan said as they turned in their putters. "I did no such thing." "You absolutely did. Beginner's luck. You've probably been playing since you could walk. My dad used to take me when I was a kid. Before I got sick, it was our thing." The way she said it, casual but with an edge of something heavier underneath, made Ethan pause. "You don't talk about your family much." "Not much to talk about. Dad left when I was in treatment. Couldn't handle it. Mom tried, but watching your kid almost die does things to people. We're better now, but it took a while." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I got through it. Got through all of it. And hey, I got really good at mini golf in the process, so there's that." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes, and Ethan recognized that look. The one that said some wounds never fully healed, they just became part of the landscape of who you were. On the drive home, Noah fell asleep in the back seat, his head tilted against the window, one hand still sticky from the slushie and clutching the scorecard, like it was a trophy despite his last place finish. Arya glanced back at him and smiled, something warm and genuine crossing her face. He's out cold.
Yeah, sugar crash. Does that happen a lot? More than I'd like. I try to limit the sweets, but he's got me wrapped around his finger. He's a good kid. He is. They drove in silence for a while, the low hum of the engine filling the space between them, the radio playing something soft and instrumental that Ethan didn't recognize. He kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel Arya watching him, studying him in that way she had that was observant without being intrusive.
"Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "You're gonna anyway." She laughed softly. "Fair. Why'd you agree to this, the mini golf thing?" Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. "Noah wanted to." "That's not the whole reason." He didn't answer right away, trying to figure out how to put it into words that didn't sound ridiculous or overly vulnerable. The truth was, he didn't entirely know why he'd called her. Or maybe he did, and he just didn't want to admit it. "I don't know," he said finally. "Maybe I was curious." "About what?" "About whether you were real." Arya frowned, turning more fully in her seat to face him. "Real?" "Yeah, you show up out of nowhere, tell me I saved your life 7 years ago, and then just fit. Like you've been here the whole time. People don't do that. They don't just walk into someone else's life and make it feel easy." "Is that what this feels like to you? Easy?" Ethan glanced at her, then back at the road, his jaw working. "Sometimes. When I'm not overthinking it." She didn't say anything for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter, more uncertain. "It doesn't feel easy to me." "No?" "No. It feels terrifying." He almost asked why, but he thought he already knew. Because easy things didn't matter. Easy things didn't change you. And what was happening between them, whatever this was, it mattered. He could feel it in the way his chest tightened when she smiled, in the way Noah had asked if she was coming back, in the way he'd picked up the phone on Sunday morning and called her without a plan or a script. When they pulled up to her apartment complex, Arya unbuckled her seatbelt but didn't get out right away. She sat there, hands folded in her lap, staring at the dashboard like she was trying to figure out what to say, how to end this without making it awkward. "Thanks for today," she said eventually. "I had fun. More fun than I've had in a while." "Yeah, me too." She hesitated, her fingers playing with the edge of her seatbelt. "Can I see you again?" Ethan's throat went dry. The question was simple, direct, but it carried weight. It wasn't just about another outing or another afternoon of mini golf. It was about whether he was willing to keep doing this, to keep opening doors he'd spent 6 years keeping locked. "Arya, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," she said quickly, cutting him off before he could find a way to say no. I like spending time with you. And Noah. That's all. No pressure. No expectations." He wanted to say no. He wanted to tell her this was a bad idea, that getting close to people only ended one way, that he'd already buried one person he loved, and he couldn't do it again, wouldn't survive it. The words were right there, waiting to be spoken. But when he opened his mouth, what came out was, "Yeah, okay." Her smile was small but real, lighting up her whole face in a way that made his chest ache. "Okay, okay," he repeated, like saying it twice would make it more real, more definite. She got out of the car, gave him one last wave, and disappeared into the building, the glass door swinging shut behind her. Ethan sat there for a minute, staring at the empty space where she'd been, his hand still gripping the steering wheel even though the car was in park. In the back seat, Noah stirred, blinking groggily. "Is Arya gone?" "Yeah, bud, she's gone." "When can we see her again?" Ethan pulled away from the curb, his chest still tight, his mind already racing ahead to all the ways this could go wrong. "I don't know." But that was a lie, and he knew it. Soon. The answer was soon. The days that followed felt different in ways Ethan couldn't quite articulate. Not bad different, just different. The routine was the same. Wake up, get Noah ready for school, go to work, pick Noah up, make dinner, bedtime. But there was something underneath it now, something new, humming in the background like a frequency he'd forgotten existed. Arya started texting him. Nothing heavy, nothing that required long responses or deep conversations. Just little things. A photo of a dog she saw on her morning run, some kind of golden retriever mix with a dopey expression that made Ethan smile despite himself. A meme about coffee that Noah would probably find hilarious. Once, she sent him a picture of a pineapple pizza with the caption, "Still wrong, will die on this hill." He didn't respond to all of them. Sometimes he was in meetings, sometimes he just didn't know what to say. But he read every single one. And more often than not, he found himself checking his phone during the day, waiting for it to buzz, feeling a small spike of disappointment when it didn't. At work, his focus started slipping in ways that were noticeable. He'd catch himself staring at his phone during meetings, zoning out while his manager droned on about quarterly projections and market analysis. His coworker, Marcus, noticed during a coffee break on Wednesday afternoon. "You good, man?" Marcus asked, leaning against Ethan's cubicle with a knowing look. "Yeah, fine." "You've been checking your phone every 5 minutes. That's not fine, that's distracted." "I'm not checking my phone every 5 minutes." Marcus raised an eyebrow, nodding at the phone currently in Ethan's hand. Sure, is it a girl?" Ethan shot him a look, defensive. "No?" "It's totally a girl. Oh my God, it's about time." "Drop it, Marcus." But Marcus was grinning now, delighted at having stumbled onto something. "Finally, I was starting to think you were going to be single forever, like one of those tragic movie characters who never moves on." "I am single. For now. Give it a month." Ethan didn't dignify that with a response, turning back to his computer screen and pretending to read an email he'd already read 3 times. That weekend, Arya invited them to a farmer's market downtown. Ethan's first instinct was to say no. Farmers markets weren't really his thing, too crowded and too much standing around looking at vegetables he could buy at the grocery store for half the price. But Noah had overheard the invitation through the phone speaker and immediately started begging with the kind of persistence that wore down even the strongest parental resolve. "Please, Dad. Please. I want to see Arya again. We just saw her a few days ago." "But I like her, and there's going to be food. She said there's a stand that sells cinnamon rolls as big as your face." "I don't think they're as big as your face." "Dad, please." Ethan sighed, knowing he was already defeated. "Fine. But if it's too crowded, we're leaving." Noah fist-pumped like he just won the lottery, and Arya's laugh came through the phone speaker, warm and genuinely amused. The market was exactly as crowded as Ethan had feared, packed with people browsing stands full of organic vegetables that looked identical to regular vegetables but cost twice as much, handmade soaps that smelled like they'd been dipped in potpourri, and overpriced jams with names like Twilight Berry Dreams that sounded more like rejected romance novels than food. But Noah was excited, practically bouncing on his toes, and when Arya met them near the entrance wearing sunglasses and a light jacket, looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her, he found himself not minding the crowd quite so much. "You made it," she said, smiling at both of them. "Barely. Traffic was a nightmare." She laughed. "Come on, there's a stand that sells the best honey you've ever tasted, like life-changing honey." "It's honey. How life-changing can it be?" "You'd be surprised." Noah grabbed her hand without hesitation. No awkwardness or shyness, just the easy trust of a kid who decided someone was safe, and dragged her toward the nearest booth. Ethan followed a few steps behind, hands in his pockets, watching the way she let Noah lead her around like they'd known each other for years instead of days. They spent the next hour wandering between stands, Arya pointing out things she thought were interesting, Noah asking a million questions about everything from how honey was made to why some apples were red and some were green. Arya bought a jar of the supposedly life-changing honey, some fresh bread that smelled incredible, and a small potted plant she claimed she wasn't going to kill this time, though her tone suggested she'd said that before. Noah convinced Ethan to buy him a caramel apple the size of a softball, which he devoured in under 3 minutes, getting sticky caramel all over his face and hands and somehow on Ethan's shirt. "How do you even manage that?" Ethan asked, trying to wipe caramel off his sleeve. "I'm talented." At one point, they stopped near a stand selling handmade jewelry, rings and bracelets and necklaces displayed on black velvet like they were museum pieces. Arya picked up a bracelet, turning it over in her hands, studying the small blue stones embedded in the silver. "You like that?" Ethan asked, coming up beside her. She set it down quickly, almost like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. "It's pretty, but I don't really wear jewelry." "Why not?" "I don't know. Never got in the habit, I guess. After treatment, I was so focused on just existing,
Little things like jewelry seemed pointless. He almost bought it for her anyway, could picture himself doing it, asking the vendor to box it up, surprising her with it later. But he talked himself out of it, too much too soon. They were still figuring out whatever this was. A bracelet felt like a statement he wasn't ready to make.
They grabbed lunch from a food truck parked at the edge of the market. Tacos for him and Noah, a veggie wrap for Arya that looked like it was mostly lettuce and regret, and sat on a bench near the edge of the market where the crowd thinned out and the noise dropped to something manageable. Noah chattered nonstop about a new video game he wanted, barely pausing to breathe or chew, and Arya listened with the same patient attention she always gave him, asking questions and making comments that proved she was actually listening, not just nodding along. "You're good with him," Ethan said quietly, keeping his voice low enough that Noah wouldn't hear over his own enthusiastic explanation of game mechanics. She glanced at him. "He makes it easy. Most people don't think kids are easy. Most people aren't paying attention." Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and took another bite of his taco. After lunch, they walked Noah to a small playground tucked behind the market, a little fenced-in area with swings and a slide and a climbing structure that had seen better days. Noah took off toward the swings immediately, leaving Ethan and Arya standing by the fence, watching. "He's got a lot of energy," Arya said, shading her eyes from the sun. "Tell me about it. Some days I don't know where it comes from." She smiled, watching Noah launch himself off the swing at the peak of the arc, landing in the wood chips with a thud that made Ethan wince. "Do you ever wish things were different?" Ethan frowned, turning to look at her. "Different how?" "I don't know. Easier, maybe. Less complicated." "Easier how? Life's complicated. That's just how it is." She shrugged, still watching Noah. "I guess I just wonder if you ever think about what life would have been like if things hadn't happened the way they did, if she hadn't died, if you'd gotten to have the family you planned." Ethan's jaw tightened, his hands gripping the fence harder than necessary. "Every day." "Yeah?" "Yeah, but it doesn't change anything, so I try not to think about it too much. Doesn't do any good." Arya was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, more vulnerable. "I think about it too." He looked at her. "About what?" "About what my life would have been like if you hadn't done what you did. If I hadn't gotten that transplant. If I'd just run out of time." "Arya, but I'm not trying to be morbid," she said quickly. "I just mean, I think about it, and every time I do, I come back to the same thing." "What's that?" She turned to face him, her eyes steady and bright in the afternoon sun. "That I'm really, really glad you said yes. That you donated. That you saved me. Because if you hadn't, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have met you. I wouldn't have met Noah. And I can't imagine not knowing you now." Ethan's chest felt too tight, his throat closing up in a way that made it hard to breathe. He wanted to say something, needed to say something, but the words wouldn't come. They were stuck somewhere between his heart and his mouth, tangled up with fear and hope and feelings he wasn't ready to name. Before he could figure it out, Noah came running over, breathless and grinning like he'd just discovered something amazing. "Dad! Arya! Come push me on the swings!" Arya smiled, the heaviness from a moment ago lifting like fog in sunlight. "Come on, let's go." Ethan followed, but the weight of her words stayed with him long after they'd left the playground, long after they'd driven her home and said goodbye, long after Noah had gone to bed and the house had fallen quiet again. "I can't imagine not knowing you now." He felt the same way, and that terrified him more than anything. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Arya became a regular fixture in their lives, not in an intrusive way, but in a way that felt natural, like she'd always been meant to be there. She'd text to see if they wanted to grab dinner at the taco place Noah loved. She'd show up at Noah's soccer games on Saturday mornings, cheering louder than anyone else in the stands, her voice hoarse by halftime. She'd bring over takeout on nights when Ethan was too exhausted to cook, showing up with Thai food or pizza, never pineapple, she'd remind him with a grin, and staying until Noah went to bed. It should have felt strange. It should have felt like too much, too fast, like they were rushing into something neither of them had fully thought through. But it didn't. It felt right in a way Ethan couldn't explain and wasn't sure he wanted to examine too closely. Like a puzzle piece he hadn't known was missing, finally clicking into place. One evening in mid-October, after Noah had gone to bed clutching the stuffed dinosaur he'd had since he was 2, Ethan and Arya sat on the back porch, splitting a six-pack of beer Ethan had found in the back of the fridge, left over from some barbecue he'd hosted months ago. The night was cool, the air sharp with the first real hint of autumn, and the stars were out in force, scattered across the sky like someone had spilled salt. "Can I ask you something?" Arya said, tipping her bottle back and taking a long drink. "You always ask me that before asking anyway." She grinned. "True. Why haven't you dated anyone in the 6 years since Lauren died?" "Yeah." Ethan leaned back in his chair, the old wood creaking under his weight, and stared up at the dark sky. The question didn't surprise him. He'd been waiting for it, honestly, but that didn't make it easier to answer. "I don't know. I guess I just didn't see the point." The point of letting someone in, of risking that again. Losing someone you love, He trailed off, trying to find words that didn't sound melodramatic or self-pitying. "It breaks something in you, and I didn't want to get broken again. So you just stopped trying." "I stopped wanting to try. There's a difference." Arya was quiet for a long moment, turning her beer bottle in her hands, watching the condensation drip onto her jeans. "You know that's not really living, right? Just existing?" "Maybe not, but it's safe." "Safe's overrated." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the challenge in her eyes. "Easy for you to say." "Is it?" Her voice was sharper now, not angry but firm, cutting through the comfortable bubble they'd built. "You think I don't know what it's like to lose things? I spent 2 years wondering if I was going to see my next birthday. I lost friends who didn't make it. I lost time I'll never get back. I lost the person I thought I was going to be, the healthy, normal girl who got to go to college and party and make stupid decisions like everyone else. So no, Ethan, it's not easy for me to say, but I'm saying it anyway, because safe isn't the same as alive." He didn't have a response to that. The words hit too close to home, cutting through defenses he'd spent years building. She took another sip of her beer, her gaze drifting out toward the dark yard. "I'm not asking you to fall in love with me or make some big declaration. I'm just asking you to stop treating me like I'm temporary, like I'm going to disappear if you blink." "I don't—" "You do," she interrupted. "Every time we're together, you've got one foot out the door, like you're waiting for me to disappear, or like you're already planning your exit strategy." Ethan's hands tightened around his bottle, the glass cold and slick against his palms. "What if you do? Disappear? What if I don't?" He didn't answer, couldn't answer, because the truth was too complicated and too simple all at once. He was terrified of losing her, but he was also terrified of having her, of caring about someone again and giving them the power to destroy him. Arya stood, setting her empty bottle on the railing with a soft clink. "I should go." "Arya—" "It's fine," she said, but her voice said it wasn't fine at all. I think we both need to figure out what this is. Because I can't keep being the only one trying. I can't keep putting myself out there while you keep one hand on the escape hatch." She left before he could stop her, before he could find the words to make her stay, and Ethan sat there alone on the porch, the night air cold against his skin, hating himself just a little bit more. He didn't call her for 3 days. It wasn't intentional, not at first. The first day, he told himself he needed space to think, to figure out what he wanted. The second day, he was busy with work and Noah and all the usual responsibilities that filled his time. The third day, he ran out of excuses and just had to admit he was being a coward. On the fourth day, Noah asked where she was. They were eating breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, nothing fancy, and Noah had been quieter than usual, pushing his food around his plate instead of inhaling it the way he normally did. "I don't know, bud," Ethan said, pouring himself another cup of coffee he didn't need. "Did you make her mad?" "Maybe." "You should say sorry." "It's not that simple." Noah looked at him with those eyes that were too old for 7, too knowing. "Yeah, it is. You just say sorry. That's what you always tell me to do when I mess up." Ethan almost laughed, because when had kids gotten so wise? "You're right. I should." "So are you gonna?" "Yeah, I am." That night, after Noah was asleep and the house had fallen into its usual quiet, Ethan pulled out his phone and stared at Arya's contact info for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 minutes. His thumb hovered over her name, his heart beating harder than it should for such a simple thing. Finally, he typed out a message. "Ethan, I'm sorry." 3 dots appeared almost immediately,
which meant she'd been looking at her phone, maybe waiting for him to reach out, or maybe just scrolling through social media. Either way, it made his chest tighten. Arya. For what? Ethan. For being an idiot. Arya. You're going to have to be more specific. Despite everything, he smiled. Ethan. For pushing you away. For treating you like you don't matter. For being too scared to admit that maybe you do. The dots appeared and disappeared 3 times, and Ethan could picture her on the other end, typing and deleting, trying to find the right words. Arya. Maybe? Ethan. Definitely. A long pause. Then, Arya. Can I come over? Ethan. Yeah. She was there in 20 minutes. Must have broken a few speed limits to make it that fast. When he opened the door, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at him, her eyes searching his face like she was trying to figure out if he meant it, if this was real, or just another false start. I meant it, he said quietly, answering the question she hadn't asked. Which part? All of it. You matter. You scare the hell out of me, but you matter. She stepped inside, and for the first time in 6 years, Ethan let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to want something again, to want someone. They didn't talk much that night. They didn't need to. She stayed until late, sitting beside him on the couch in the dim light of the TV, playing some movie neither of them was watching, her head resting against his shoulder, his arm around her in a way that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. I know. Do you? Because sometimes I'm not sure you believe that. He tightened his arm around her. I'm trying to. That's all I'm asking. And sitting there in the dark, feeling her warmth against him, Ethan felt something inside him shift. Not heal. Healing took time, and he wasn't there yet, but shift. Like a door he'd kept locked for 6 years was finally starting to open. It terrified him, but he didn't pull away. Not this time. October bled into November, and the routines they'd built became more solid, more permanent. Arya started keeping a toothbrush at his house, then a drawer in his dresser, then half the closet in the guest room that had slowly transformed into her office. They didn't talk about what it meant, didn't label it or make it official. It just happened, piece by piece, until one day Ethan realized she'd basically moved in without either of them acknowledging it. Thanksgiving came and Caroline invited them all to her place. Her husband Mike, their 2 kids who were older than Noah and mostly ignored him, and now Arya. Ethan had warned Arya that his sister was a lot, that she asked invasive questions and had no sense of boundaries, but Arya had just laughed and said she could handle it. She could. Caroline pulled Ethan aside in the kitchen while Arya was helping Noah and the other kids set the table. I like her, Caroline said, pretending to check on the turkey, but really just looking for an excuse to corner him. Good. I'm serious. She's good for you. Good for Noah. I know. So don't screw this up. Ethan glared at her. Why does everyone assume I'm going to screw it up? Because you have a track record. You get scared, you pull away. It's what you do. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Caroline's expression softened. She put a hand on his arm, her voice dropping. I'm not trying to be harsh. I just don't want to see you lose something good because you're too afraid to hold on to it. I'm not going to lose her. Then prove it. Stop waiting for the other shoe to drop and just be happy. Dinner was chaotic in the way family dinners always were. Too much food, too much noise, kids arguing over who got the last roll, Mike telling stories that went on too long. But Arya fit right in, laughing at Mike's terrible jokes, helping Caroline in the kitchen, asking the kids about school in a way that didn't feel forced. At one point, Noah leaned over and whispered to Ethan, loud enough for half the table to hear, I really like Arya. Can she stay forever? The table went quiet for half a second, everyone's attention shifting to Ethan. He felt his face go hot, but when he looked at Arya, she was smiling, her eyes bright. We'll see, bud, he said, and Caroline kicked him under the table. Later, after they'd helped clean up and driven home through streets lined with houses already decorated for Christmas, even though Thanksgiving had just ended, Arya turned to him in the car. Did you mean that? Mean what? What you said to Noah, we'll see. Does that mean you're thinking about it? About me staying? Ethan kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. Yeah, I'm thinking about it. And I think I want you to.
He heard her breath catch, and when he glanced over, she was smiling in a way that made his chest ache. "Good," she said, "because I want to stay." The first week of December brought the kind of cold that settled deep in your bones and didn't let go. Ethan started keeping the heat cranked higher than he normally would, and Noah complained every morning about having to wear long sleeves and a jacket. Arya kept showing up for Wednesday dinners, except now she didn't leave. She'd stay the night, sleep in the guest room that was hers now in everything but name, and be there in the morning when Noah came downstairs for breakfast. One evening, after Noah had gone to bed, earlier than usual because he'd worn himself out at a friend's birthday party, Ethan and Arya sat in the living room with the TV on low, some documentary about space that neither of them was really watching. Arya had her legs tucked under her on the couch, a blanket draped over her lap, and Ethan sat on the other end, close enough to touch, but not touching, the space between them feeling both comfortable and charged. "Can I ask you something?" she said, and Ethan almost laughed because she always started with that. "Here we go," she smiled. "It's not a bad question, I promise." "That's what you always say." "Do you ever think about the future? Like, really think about it?" Ethan's chest tightened. "What kind of future?" "Any kind. Your future, Noah's. Whether things will be different a year from now, 5 years from now. Sometimes. Why?" "Because I do. All the time. And I need to know if you do too." He turned to look at her, saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the way she was holding herself like she was bracing for impact. "What are you really asking me?" Arya was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing absent patterns on the blanket. When she spoke, her voice was softer, more uncertain. "I'm asking if this is real for you, if I'm real for you, because I can't do this if I'm just filling a space until you're ready to move on to someone else. I need to know that when you think about the future, I'm in it." "You are," he said, the words coming out rougher than he intended. "You're in it. I don't know what that looks like yet, but you're in it." "You mean that?" "Yeah, I mean it." She shifted closer, closing the distance between them, and took his hand. Her fingers were warm, her grip firm. "Then I need to tell you something." Ethan's stomach dropped. The way she said it, careful and serious, made alarm bells go off in his head. "What?" "It's not bad," she said quickly, reading his expression. "At least, I don't think it is. But you deserve to know." "Arya, you're freaking me out." She took a deep breath. "I have a checkup coming up. Next week. With Dr. Patel, my oncologist. It's routine. I go every few months to make sure everything's still okay, that the cancer hasn't come back. Okay? But the thing is, I've been having some symptoms. Nothing major, just fatigue. More than usual. And sometimes I get dizzy for no reason. It's probably nothing. But I wanted to tell you before the appointment, in case... In case what? In case it's not nothing." Ethan felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. He'd known, on some level, that this was a possibility. Arya's medical history wasn't a secret. She'd told him about the leukemia, about the transplant, about the years of recovery. But knowing it intellectually and facing it as a real, immediate possibility were two very different things. "When's the appointment?" he asked, his voice tight. "Thursday, 2:00. I'm coming with you." "You don't have to..." "I'm coming with you," he repeated, firmer this time. "That's not up for debate." Arya's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed his hand. "Okay. Thank you." They sat there in silence for a while, the documentary still playing in the background, talking about black holes and the expansion of the universe, things that felt impossibly distant compared to what they were facing. "I'm scared," Arya said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Me too. What if it's back? What if..." "Then we deal with it," Ethan said, cutting her off before she could spiral. "Together. Whatever it is, we deal with it together." She leaned into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, and for the first time since she'd walked into his life, Ethan let himself fully acknowledge how much she meant to him, how much it would destroy him to lose her. And sitting there in that moment, he made a decision. He wasn't going to lose her, not without a fight. Thursday came too quickly. Ethan called in sick to work, asked Caroline to pick Noah up from school, and drove Arya to Mercy General in silence. She was quiet the whole way, staring out the window, her hands folded in her lap so tightly her knuckles were white. The hospital smelled the way hospitals always did, antiseptic and floor wax and something faintly medicinal that made Ethan's stomach turn. They checked in at the front desk, and a nurse led them to an examination room on the third floor, the same floor where Ethan had found her that night after she'd collapsed. Dr. Patel arrived 20 minutes later, carrying a tablet and wearing the kind of expression that gave nothing away. She shook both their hands, sat down across from them, and got straight to the point. Arya, I've reviewed your recent symptoms, and I want to run some tests, blood work, imaging, the full panel. Based on what you've described, it could be a number of things, some serious, some not. I don't want to speculate until we have data. How long will the test take? Ethan asked. A few hours for the blood work. Imaging we can do today if there's an opening. Results should be back by tomorrow afternoon. Arya nodded, her face pale but composed. Okay, let's do it. The next few hours were a blur. Blood draws, waiting rooms, more waiting rooms, an MRI that took 45 minutes and left Arya looking exhausted and shaken. Ethan stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, bringing her water, making stupid jokes to try to distract her when the anxiety got too heavy. By the time they left the hospital, it was almost 7 p.m. They picked up Noah from Caroline's. Ethan had texted her to keep him for dinner, and drove home in silence. Noah chattered about his day, oblivious to the tension, and Ethan was grateful for it. That night, after Noah was in bed, Arya sat on the edge of the guest bed, staring at nothing. Ethan sat down beside her. You okay? No. Fair. She turned to look at him, and he saw the fear in her eyes, raw and unfiltered. What if it's bad, Ethan? What if the cancer's back and this time it doesn't work? Then we fight it. We fight until there's nothing left to fight. That's not how cancer works. I don't care how it works. I'm not losing you. She started crying then, really crying, and Ethan pulled her into his arms and let her break, let her be scared and vulnerable and human. And when she finally calmed down, when the tears slowed and her breathing evened out, he said the thing he'd been too afraid to say for weeks. I love you. She pulled back, staring at him like she wasn't sure she'd heard him right. What? I love you. I should have said it sooner. I should have said it that night you told me. But I was scared and stupid, and I let fear get in the way. But I'm saying it now. I love you, Arya, and whatever happens tomorrow, that doesn't change. Arya's face crumpled, and she kissed him through her tears, her hands shaking as they cupped his face. I love you too. So much. They stayed like that for a long time, holding on to each other like they were the only solid things in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. The call came the next afternoon while Ethan was pretending to work from home. His phone rang, Arya's name on the screen, and his heart jumped into his throat. Hello? It's not cancer, she said, and he heard the sob break through her voice. It's not cancer, Ethan. The tests came back clean. He closed his eyes, relief flooding through him so intensely he thought he might collapse. Thank God. Dr. Patel said it's anemia, severe anemia, and some heart arrhythmia from the old treatment. She wants me on medication and I need to rest more, but it's not cancer. It's manageable. I'm coming to get you. I'm already on my way home. When she walked through the door 20 minutes later, Ethan met her there and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she laughed. I can't breathe. Don't care. Noah came running from the living room. Is Arya okay? She's okay, bud. She's more than okay. Noah wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stood there in the entryway, the three of them. And Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Hope. Real, tangible hope. And for the first time since Lauren died, he let himself believe that maybe the future didn't have to be something he was afraid of. Maybe it could be something beautiful. The days after the diagnosis were strange, in a way Ethan hadn't expected. Relief should have made everything lighter, easier, but instead it brought its own kind of weight. Arya was fine, not dying, not facing the monster she'd spent 7 years running from, but she wasn't healthy either. The anemia was severe enough that Dr. Patel had put her on iron supplements that made her nauseous, and the heart arrhythmia meant beta blockers that left her foggy and tired. She'd sleep 12 hours and wake up exhausted. She'd stand up too fast and have to grab onto something to keep from falling. Ethan watched her struggle with it, saw the frustration in her eyes every time her body betrayed her, and felt helpless in a way that reminded him too much of the year Lauren got sick. I'm fine, Arya would say, waving him off when he hovered too close, when he asked if she needed anything for the third time in an hour. "You're not fine. I'm managing." That's not the same thing. They had that conversation at least once a day, sometimes more. One afternoon, about a week after the test results, Ethan came home early from work to find Arya sitting on the bathroom floor, her face pale and clammy, one hand braced against the wall. His heart stopped. What happened? He was across the room in seconds, kneeling beside her. "I'm fine, just got dizzy." "You're sitting on the bathroom floor. That's not fine. I just needed a minute." "How long have you been here?" She didn't answer, which meant it had been longer than she wanted to admit. Ethan helped her to her feet, his arm around her waist, and guided her to the bedroom. She didn't fight him, which scared him more than anything. Arya always fought when she thought she was being treated like she was fragile. "Sit," he said, pointing to the bed. She sat. "When did you last eat?" "This morning, I think." "You think?" "I had coffee, maybe toast, I don't remember." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear warring inside him. "You can't do this. You can't skip meals when you're on medication that makes you sick." "I know. Then why?" "Because I forgot, okay?" Her voice cracked, and when she looked up at him, her eyes were red. "I forgot because the medication makes me foggy, and I can't think straight half the time, and I hate it. I hate feeling like this. I hate being weak." The anger drained out of him all at once. He sat down beside her on the bed, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You're not weak. I feel weak. Feeling weak and being weak are different things." "Are they?" "Yeah, they are." Arya leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and Ethan wrapped an arm around her. They sat there in silence for a long time, the afternoon light filtering through the curtains, casting everything in shades of gold. "I'm scared," she said finally, her voice small. "Of what?" "That this is it. That I'll never feel normal again. That I'll always be the sick girl who needs help with everything." "You're not." "I am, though. Look at me. I can't even stand up without getting dizzy. How is that not being the sick girl?" Ethan turned to face her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek, forcing her to look at him. "You're not defined by this. You're not defined by what your body can or can't do right now. You're Arya. You're stubborn and funny, and you cheat at mini golf, and you make Noah laugh harder than anyone I've ever seen. That's who you are. Not this." She closed her eyes, tears spilling over. "I don't feel like her anymore." "Then we'll figure out how to get you back. Together." "You keep saying that. Together." "Because I mean it." She kissed him then, slow and soft, and Ethan felt something in his chest crack open. Not break. Expand. Like there was more room for her than there had been before, like loving her had made him bigger somehow. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I'm sorry I'm such a mess." "You're not a mess, you're just adjusting." "That's a generous word for it." "I'm a generous guy." She laughed, and the sound was watery but real. They fell into a new routine after that. Ethan set alarms on Arya's phone to remind her to eat, to take her medication, to rest. She hated it at first, complained that he was treating her like a child, but eventually she stopped fighting. He'd come home from work to find her napping on the couch, or sitting at the kitchen table with a book she wasn't reading, staring out the window at nothing. Noah noticed the change too. He'd ask questions. Why was Arya so tired all the time? Why didn't she play with him as much anymore? And Ethan did his best to explain in terms a 7-year-old would understand. Arya's body was healing. She needed rest. It wasn't forever. "But she's okay, right?" Noah asked one night at dinner, pushing peas around his plate. "She's okay," Ethan assured him. "She just needs time." "How much time?" "I don't know, bud. That's not a very good answer. It's the only one I've got." Noah seemed to accept that, but Ethan could see the worry in his eyes. The way he'd watch Arya when he thought no one was looking, like he was afraid she might disappear. Ethan understood the feeling. 2 weeks before Christmas, Arya's doctor adjusted her medication. The new beta blocker was supposed to have fewer side effects, less brain fog, more energy. It took a few days to kick in, but when it did, the difference was noticeable. Arya started staying awake past 8 p.m. again. She'd help Noah with his homework without losing her train of thought halfway through an explanation. She'd laugh more, move easier, look less like she was fighting her own body every second of the day. I feel human again, she told Ethan one evening, curled up next to him on the couch, while Noah played a video game on the floor, the sound effects loud and repetitive. Good. I'm serious. I forgot what it felt like to not be exhausted all the time. I'm glad the new medication's working. Me too. She paused, her fingers playing with the hem of his shirt. Thank you. For what? For not giving up on me. For not treating me like I was dying even when I felt like I was. Ethan kissed the top of her head. I'm not going anywhere. I know, but thank you anyway. Christmas came with all its chaos. Noah insisted they get a bigger tree this year, and somehow Ethan found himself dragging a 7-foot Douglas fir into the living room while Noah and Arya supervised, offering helpful suggestions like a little to the left and no, your other left. Ja, must this. They decorated it together using the ornaments Ethan had saved from when Lauren was alive alongside new ones Arya had bought. A miniature soccer ball for Noah, a tiny lighthouse for reasons she wouldn't explain, a glass icicle that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. On Christmas Eve, after Noah had finally gone to bed, vibrating with excitement about presents and Santa, Ethan and Arya sat by the tree, the lights glowing soft in the dark room. This is nice, Arya said, her head on his shoulder. Yeah, it is. I've never had this before. The whole family Christmas thing. What did you do before? When I was sick? Nothing. I was usually in the hospital or too weak to leave bed. After I recovered, it was just me and my mom, and she was still so scared of losing me that she'd hover the whole time. It was exhausting. This is different. Good different. The best different. Ethan tightened his arm around her. I'm glad you're here. Me too. They sat there in comfortable silence, watching the lights blink on and off in their programmed pattern. And Ethan let himself imagine this being his life forever. Coming home to Arya, decorating trees together, building traditions with her and Noah. It didn't seem impossible anymore. It seemed possible. Real. Christmas morning was exactly the chaos Ethan had expected. Noah was up before dawn, shaking them both awake with the kind of energy that shouldn't exist at 5:30 in the morning. Ethan groaned, pulled the pillow over his head, and tried to ignore the small hands shaking his shoulder. Dad, it's Christmas. Wake up. It's too early. Santa came. Santa can wait. From the doorway, Arya's voice called out, amused and still rough with sleep. Let the man sleep, Noah. It's barely light out. But Arya, give us 10 minutes. Then we'll do presents. Noah groaned dramatically but retreated, and Ethan heard his footsteps thunder down the stairs. He rolled over to find Arya standing in the doorway, wrapped in the oversized sweatshirt she'd stolen from his closet weeks ago and never returned, her hair a mess and a soft smile on her face. Merry Christmas, she said. Merry Christmas. You know we're not getting those 10 minutes, right? I know, but it was worth a shot. They made it downstairs 5 minutes later to find Noah practically vibrating next to the tree, eyeing the pile of presents with barely contained excitement. Arya made coffee while Ethan got the camera ready. Caroline had lectured him about documenting these moments, about how fast kids grew up, and for the next hour, the living room was chaos. Wrapping paper everywhere, Noah's delighted shouts echoing off the walls, Arya laughing at something ridiculous Ethan had bought her as a joke gift. Noah got the video game he'd been asking for since September, a new soccer ball to replace the one that had gone flat, and a stack of books Arya had picked out about space and dinosaurs and ancient civilizations. Arya opened a small jewelry box to find the bracelet Ethan had almost bought at the farmer's market months ago, and her eyes went bright and wet. You remembered, she said, her voice thick. Yeah, I remembered. She kissed him right there, with Noah making exaggerated gagging noises in the background, and Ethan felt something settle in his chest. This was what he wanted, this messy, imperfect, beautiful life. This exact thing. Later, after Noah had worn himself out and fallen asleep on the couch, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and new toys, Ethan and Arya sat on the back porch, bundled in blankets despite the cold, watching the sun set over the snow-covered yard. Thank you, Arya said quietly. For what? For this. For letting me be part of it. For giving me a Christmas that feels like home. Ethan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. You are part of it. You have been for a while.
She leaned her head on his shoulder. I've been thinking. About what? About the future. About us. About what comes next. Ethan's chest tightened slightly, but he kept his voice steady. Yeah? What about it? I want to talk to Noah. About me. About us. About what this means. What do you want to tell him? She was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. That I'm not going anywhere. That I love him. That I love you. And that if it's okay with both of you, I'd like to stay. For real. Not just until the medication stabilizes or until I'm feeling better. Just stay. Permanently. Ethan felt his throat go tight, emotion welling up faster than he could control. You sure? Yeah, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, something floral he couldn't name. Then let's tell him. They waited until after New Year's, when the holiday chaos had settled and life had returned to something close to normal. Ethan made Noah's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread, and after they'd eaten and cleaned up together, the three of them sat in the living room. Noah looked between them, his expression shifting from curious to suspicious. Am I in trouble? He asked. No, Ethan said, settling onto the couch next to him. We just want to talk to you about something. About what? Arya leaned forward from the armchair, her hands clasped in her lap. About me. And your dad. And you. About our family. Noah frowned. What about us? How would you feel if I stayed here, permanently, like moved in for real, all my stuff, all the time, no more going back to my apartment? Noah's eyes went wide. You mean like, live here? With us? Yeah. Forever? If that's okay with you. Noah looked at Ethan, his expression serious in the way only kids could be when they were thinking hard about something important. Is that okay with you, Dad? Ethan smiled, his heart so full it hurt. More than okay. I want her to stay. Noah turned back to Arya, chewing on his bottom lip. Will you still help me with my homework? Arya laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Yes. And play video games with me. Yes. And make those cookies you made at Christmas? The ones with the chocolate chips? Definitely. Noah nodded slowly, processing, working through something in his mind. Then, quietly, almost too quiet to hear, he asked, Are you going to be my mom? The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. He'd known it was coming, had braced himself for it, but hearing it out loud still made his breath catch. He glanced at Arya, saw the tears gathering in her eyes, saw her struggle to find the right words. I can't replace your mom, Noah, she said gently, her voice steady despite the emotion. Nobody can. She'll always be your mom, and that's important. But I can be someone who loves you and takes care of you and is here for you if that's what you want. I can be your family. Noah looked down at his hands, his fingers twisting together. I don't really remember her. My first mom. I know, sweetheart. Dad says she was really nice, that she loved me a lot. I'm sure she did. I bet she loved you more than anything. Do you think she'd be mad if I wanted you to stay? If I wanted you to be my family mom? Ethan's vision blurred. He opened his mouth to answer, but Arya spoke first. I think, she said gently, reaching out to take Noah's hand, that she'd want you to be happy and loved and safe. And if me being here makes that happen, then no. I don't think she'd be mad. I think she'd be grateful that you have people who care about you. Noah looked up at her, his bottom lip trembling slightly, his eyes wet. I want you to stay. Arya pulled him into a hug, and Noah wrapped his arms around her neck, holding on tight. Ethan watched them, his heart so full it felt like it might burst, and joined the hug, wrapping his arms around both of them. This was his family, broken and rebuilt and imperfect, but his. And for the first time in 6 years, that felt like enough. More than enough. January brought snow and cold and a new rhythm to their lives. Arya officially moved in, bringing the last of her things from her apartment, boxes of books and kitchen gadgets and clothes that filled up the remaining closet space. They cleared out the garage to make room for her car, rearranged furniture to accommodate her desk in what had been the guest room, hung her artwork on walls that had been bare for too long. It felt right, like pieces falling into place. Noah adapted faster than Ethan had expected,
He started calling Arya by her name most of the time, but every once in a while he'd slip and say Mom, usually when he was distracted or excited about something. The first time it happened, Arya had frozen, her eyes going wide, and Ethan had held his breath waiting to see how she'd react. She'd smiled, soft and genuine, and said, "Yeah, buddy?" And that had been that. One night in late January, after Noah had gone to bed clutching the dinosaur book Arya had bought him for Christmas, Ethan found Arya in their bedroom now, not just his, staring at the framed photo of Lauren he kept on the dresser. "You okay?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Yeah, just thinking." "About what?" "About her. About whether I'm doing this right." Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. "You're doing fine." "How do you know?" Because Noah's happy, because you make him laugh, because he feels safe with you. That's all that matters. Arya leaned into him, her head against his chest. "I don't want to replace her." "You're not. You're just adding to what she started, continuing it. That's different." "Is it?" "Yeah, it is." They stood there in silence for a while, and Ethan thought about Lauren, about what she would think of all this. He liked to believe she'd be happy, that she'd want Noah to have someone like Arya in his life, someone who loved him and cared for him and wasn't afraid to stay. He had to believe that. "I love you," Arya said quietly. "I love you too. I mean it. I really love you, both of you. This whole messy, complicated thing we've built." "I know." "Do you? Because sometimes I worry that you still think I'm going to leave, that you're waiting for me to disappear." Ethan turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. "I'm not waiting for you to leave. I'm done waiting for bad things to happen. I'm just here, with you. That's all." She kissed him, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning instead of an ending. February came with Valentine's Day, which Ethan had never been great at celebrating, even when Lauren was alive. Arya claimed she didn't care about the holiday, that it was commercialized nonsense, but Ethan saw the way she looked at the flower displays in the grocery store, the way she smiled at couples holding hands in restaurants. So he planned something. Nothing elaborate. He wasn't that guy. But something. He asked Caroline to watch Noah for the evening, made a reservation at the Italian place downtown that Arya had mentioned liking once, and bought flowers from the grocery store because the fancy florist seemed like overkill. When he told Arya they were going out, she looked at him suspiciously. "Going out where?" "Dinner." "Why?" "Because it's Valentine's Day, and I want to take you to dinner. Is that okay?" "You don't have to do that." "I know. I want to." She smiled, and he saw her soften. "Okay. Give me 20 minutes to change." She came downstairs 30 minutes later wearing a dress he'd never seen before, dark blue and simple, but somehow perfect, and Ethan forgot how to form words for a solid 5 seconds. "You look—" "I know. I clean up okay." That's an understatement. Dinner was good. The food was better than he'd expected, the wine was decent, and the conversation flowed easily. They talked about everything and nothing, Noah's upcoming soccer season, Arya's new freelance clients, whether pineapple on pizza would ever be acceptable. It wouldn't, she maintained. At one point, Arya reached across the table and took his hand. "Thank you for this." "For what?" "For making me feel like I matter, like this matters." "You do matter. This does matter." "I know, but it's nice to hear." On the drive home, Arya was quiet, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. Ethan glanced over at her. "You okay?" "Yeah, just happy." "Good. Really happy. Like, scary happy." "Why is that scary?" "Because I'm not used to it. Happiness. Having things I don't want to lose." Ethan reached over and took her hand. "You're not going to lose this. I'm not going anywhere. Noah's not going anywhere. We're here." "Promise?" "Promise." When they got home, Caroline reported that Noah had been an angel, hadn't argued about bedtime, had even brushed his teeth without being asked. Ethan suspected she was exaggerating, but he didn't argue. After Caroline left, Ethan and Arya checked on Noah, fast asleep, covers kicked off like always, and then went to their room. They got ready for bed in comfortable silence, the kind that came from knowing someone well enough that words weren't always necessary. As Ethan climbed into bed, Arya turned to him. I've been thinking about something. Yeah? About the future. About making this official. His heart skipped. Official how? I don't know. Maybe getting married eventually. Not right now, but someday. Ethan stared at her, his mind racing. Marriage. He hadn't thought about marriage since Lauren, hadn't let himself consider it as a possibility. But hearing Arya say it, seeing the hope and vulnerability in her eyes, he realized he wanted it, wanted her, wanted forever with her. Yeah, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Yeah, I'd like that. Yeah? Yeah. She kissed him, and Ethan pulled her close, feeling like the luckiest man alive. March brought Arya's 3-month follow-up appointment with Dr. Patel. Ethan took the day off work to go with her, and they sat in the waiting room holding hands while Noah was at school, both of them tense despite trying not to be. When Dr. Patel called them back, Ethan's heart was pounding. But the doctor was smiling, and that had to be a good sign. Your blood work looks great, Dr. Patel said, pulling up results on her tablet. Iron levels are back to normal. Heart rhythm has stabilized. The medication is working exactly how we hoped. Arya let out a breath she'd been holding. So I'm okay? You're doing very well. Keep taking your medication, keep eating regularly, keep resting when you need to. But yes, Arya, you're okay. In the car on the way home, Arya cried. Happy tears, she said, but Ethan knew it was more than that. It was relief. It was fear finally releasing its grip. It was the weight of uncertainty lifting. We're okay, she said, more to herself than to him. We're really okay. Yeah, Ethan said, squeezing her hand. We are. And for the first time in a long time, he believed it completely. Spring arrived slowly that year, melting the snow in uneven patches and turning the world green again in fits and starts. The trees budded, the neighbors started mowing their lawns on Saturday mornings, and Noah's soccer season kicked off with practices twice a week that left him exhausted and filthy and happier than Ethan had seen him in months. Arya became a fixture on the sidelines, cheering louder than any of the other parents, her voice hoarse by the end of every game. She'd bring orange slices and water bottles, help the coach set up cones, and high-five every kid on the team whether they won or lost. The other parents started greeting her by name, including her in their conversations about carpools and snack schedules, and Ethan watched it all happen with something close to wonder. She fit. She belonged. And nobody questioned it. One Saturday in late April, after a particularly brutal game that Noah's team lost 3-1, they stopped for ice cream on the way home. Noah ordered a cone with 2 scoops, chocolate and cookie dough, and proceeded to get more of it on his face than in his mouth. Arya laughed and tried to wipe his chin with a napkin while he squirmed away, protesting that he wasn't a baby. You've got ice cream in your hair, kid. You're definitely still a baby. Am not. R2. Ethan watched them bicker affectionately and felt something settle in his chest. This was his life now. This chaos, this noise, this overwhelming sense of rightness. It still scared him sometimes, the idea that he could lose this, that something could go wrong and take it all away. But the fear was quieter now, manageable. That evening, after Noah had crashed hard from the sugar and exhaustion and was snoring softly in his room, Ethan found Arya in the kitchen, washing dishes even though he'd told her 100 times they could just use the dishwasher. You don't have to do that, he said, leaning against the counter. I know, but I like it. It's meditative. Washing dishes is meditative? For me, yeah. Gives me time to think. What are you thinking about? She glanced at him over her shoulder, a small smile playing at her lips. You, us. How different my life is now compared to a year ago. Good different? The best different. She dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him fully. I've been meaning to talk to you about something. Ethan's stomach tightened instinctively. Conversations that started with, I've been meaning to talk to you, rarely went anywhere good. Okay. It's not bad, she said quickly, reading his expression. At least I hope it's not bad, but I need to tell you something, and I don't want you to freak out. You're kind of freaking me out right now. She took a breath, gathering her courage. My lease on the apartment is up at the end of the month. I've been paying rent on a place I haven't lived in for 3 months, which is stupid, but I kept it because I wasn't sure. I didn't want to presume anything. But my landlord needs an answer by Monday, and I need to know if this is real. If I'm really staying here or if I should renew the lease just in case. Ethan stared at her, processing. Just in case of what? In case you change your mind, in case you decide this is too much, in case I'm not going to change my mind. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. He crossed the space between them, taking her hands in his. Arya, you've been living here for months. Your stuff is everywhere. You're on Noah's emergency contact list at school. You're part of this family. I'm not going to change my mind. But what ifs? No what ifs. Let the lease go. Stay here, officially, permanently, all of it. Her eyes filled with tears, and she laughed, the sound wet and shaky. Okay. Okay? Yeah, okay. He kissed her, and she kissed him back. And Ethan felt like he'd just crossed some invisible line he hadn't known he was walking toward. May brought warmer weather and the end of the school year approaching fast. Noah's teacher sent home a note about the upcoming spring concert, where the second graders would perform a series of songs they'd been practicing for months. Noah was convinced he was going to forget all the words and embarrass himself in front of everyone. You're not going to forget, Arya assured him over dinner one night. How do you know? Because I've heard you singing those songs in the shower for 3 weeks. You know them better than you know your own name. What if I throw up? Then you throw up. It happens. Nobody's going to remember it next year. That's not helping. Ethan bit back a smile. You're going to be fine, bud, and even if you're not, we'll be there cheering for you anyway. The night of the concert, they arrived early to get good seats. The elementary school auditorium was packed with parents holding cameras and grandparents trying to figure out how to work their phones to record video. Ethan spotted Caroline and her family across the room and waved. Arya sat between him and the aisle, her knee bouncing with nervous energy. You're more anxious than he is, Ethan observed. I know, I can't help it. I want him to do well. He's going to be fine. But what if he's going to be fine? When the second graders filed onto the stage, Ethan spotted Noah immediately. Third row, second from the left, wearing the collared shirt they'd argued about that morning because Noah had wanted to wear his soccer jersey. Noah scanned the audience, found them, and his face split into a grin. He waved, and Arya waved back enthusiastically. The concert was exactly what you'd expect from a room full of 7-year-olds. Chaotic, loud, off-key in places, but charming in its honesty. Noah didn't forget the words, he didn't throw up. He sang with his whole heart, his voice louder than most of the other kids, and when it was over, Arya was crying. Why are you crying? Ethan asked, amused. Because he was perfect. Did you see him? He was so confident up there. He was pretty great. He was amazing. After the concert, they took Noah out for ice cream again. His choice, and quickly becoming a family tradition. He talked non-stop about the performance, about how he'd almost forgotten the second verse of one song but recovered, about how his friend Tyler had picked his nose the entire time and probably ended up on everyone's videos. You were great, Arya told him. Really great. I'm proud of you. Noah beamed. Thanks, Mom. The words slipped out so naturally, so easily, that it took Ethan a second to register what had happened. Arya froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth, her eyes going wide. Noah didn't seem to notice, already moving on to another story about something that had happened backstage. Later that night, after Noah was in bed, Arya found Ethan in the living room. He called me Mom, she said, standing in the doorway. I know. That's the first time he's done it on purpose. Like, not a slip or an accident, just Mom. How do you feel about it? She was quiet for a moment, her fingers twisting together. Scared. Happy. Overwhelmed. All of it. That's allowed. Is it weird that I want him to keep doing it? No, it's not weird. I'm not trying to replace her. I'm not trying to... Ethan stood and crossed to her, putting his hands on her shoulders. I know, and Lauren would know too. You're not replacing her. You're just being who Noah needs you to be, that's all. You really think she'd be okay with this? I think she'd be grateful. I think she'd be happy that Noah has someone who loves him the way you do. Arya's eyes filled with tears, and she leaned into him. I love him so much. I love both of you so much. We love you too. They stood there in the quiet house, holding each other, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come. From that first awkward meeting on his doorstep to this, a family, imperfect and complicated, but real. June arrived with summer vacation and long days that seemed to stretch forever. Noah was out of school, which meant finding ways to keep him occupied that didn't involve video games and YouTube for 8 hours straight. Arya had the brilliant idea to sign him up for a soccer camp that ran for 2 weeks, and Noah was thrilled. On the first day of camp, they dropped him off together. Noah ran toward the field without looking back, his cleats already muddy from the morning dew, and Arya watched him go with a mixture of pride and something else Ethan couldn't quite identify. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just... He's growing up so fast." "Tell me about it. Feels like yesterday he was still in diapers." "Do you ever wish you could freeze time? Just keep him this age forever?" "Sometimes, but then I remember that every age has been my favorite age. I think the next one will be too." Arya smiled. "You're a good dad, you know that?" "I'm trying." "You're more than trying, you're succeeding." They drove home in comfortable silence, and Ethan found himself thinking about the future more than he used to. Not in the anxious, fear-driven way he had for years, but in a hopeful way, planning way. He thought about Noah getting older, about high school and college and all the milestones that were coming. He thought about Arya being there for all of it. He thought about growing old together, about building a life that was bigger than just surviving. That afternoon, while Arya was working at her desk in the office, Ethan made a decision. He drove to the jewelry store downtown, the one with the good reviews and the owner who'd helped him pick out Lauren's engagement ring a decade ago. The owner, Mr. Patterson, an older man with kind eyes and steady hands, recognized him immediately. "Ethan Brooks. Been a long time." "Yeah, it has. What can I do for you?" "I need a ring." Mr. Patterson smiled knowingly. "Engagement or anniversary?" "Engagement." "Well then, let's find you something special." They spent an hour looking at rings. Ethan wasn't sure what he was looking for until he saw it. A simple platinum band with a small diamond, elegant without being flashy. It reminded him of Arya. Understated, but perfect. "This one," he said. "Good choice. When are you planning to propose?" "I don't know yet. Soon." "Well, whenever you do, she's a lucky woman." Ethan paid for the ring, had it sized, and walked out of the store with a small velvet box in his pocket and a plan forming in his mind. He waited for the right moment, not because he was scared, though he was, a little, but because he wanted it to be special, meaningful, something they'd both remember. The opportunity came in mid-July. They'd planned a weekend trip to the lake, just the three of them, renting a small cabin and spending 2 days swimming and fishing and doing nothing in particular. Noah was ecstatic, talking about it nonstop for the entire week leading up to it. The cabin was exactly what Ethan had hoped for. Small but comfortable, right on the water, with a dock that extended out into the lake and a fire pit in the backyard. They spent the first day exploring, swimming until their fingers pruned, and roasting marshmallows that Noah insisted on lighting on fire because that's the best part, Dad. The second evening, after Noah had finally crashed from exhaustion and was asleep in the cabin's single bedroom, Ethan and Arya sat on the dock, their feet dangling in the water, watching the sun set over the lake. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, the kind of sunset that looked too perfect to be real. "This is nice," Arya said, her head on his shoulder. "Yeah, it is. Thank you for planning this. I know you had to take time off work, and I know it's not easy with everything going on, but this is perfect." Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. He'd been carrying the ring in his pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for this exact moment, and now that it was here, he was terrified. What if she said no? What if it was too soon? What if... "Arya," he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. "Yeah? I need to ask you something." She pulled back to look at him, concern crossing her face. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah, everything's perfect, actually. That's kind of the point." He took a breath, trying to steady himself. 7 months ago, you showed up at my door and told me I saved your life. But the truth is, you saved mine. You saved both of ours. You came into our lives and you made everything better, brighter, easier, more full. And I know we've talked about the future, about making this permanent, but I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to keep calling you my girlfriend or my partner or any of those words that don't feel big enough for what you are to us. He pulled the ring box from his pocket, and Arya's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes going wide. "I want to call you my wife, Ethan continued, his voice shaking now. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you that's messy and complicated and perfect in all the imperfect ways. I want to grow old with you. I want Noah to have you as his mom, officially. I want all of it. So, will you marry me? Arya was crying now, tears streaming down her face, and for one horrible moment, Ethan thought she was going to say no. But then she nodded, laughing through her tears. Yes, yes, of course, yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him, hard and desperate and full of promise. When they pulled apart, she was still crying, and he was probably crying too, and neither of them cared. I love you, she said. I love you so much. I love you too. They sat there on the dock until the sun had fully set and the stars had come out, holding each other and talking about the future, about wedding plans and honeymoons and all the little details that didn't matter as much as the big picture. At some point, they heard the cabin door open, and Noah's sleepy voice called out. Where are you guys? Out here, bud, Ethan called back. Noah appeared on the dock, rubbing his eyes. What are you doing? Arya held up her hand, the ring catching the moonlight. Your dad just asked me to marry him. Noah's eyes went wide, and then he was running, launching himself at both of them, with enough force to nearly knock them into the water. Really? You're getting married? Really? Ethan confirmed. Does that mean Arya's staying forever? Forever and ever, Arya said, pulling him into a hug. This is the best day ever. Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, and sitting there under the stars with his family, his real, actual family, he felt something he hadn't felt in 6 years. Complete. They got married in August, in the backyard of the house that had once felt too empty and now felt exactly right. Caroline officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose, and Noah stood beside Ethan as his best man, wearing a suit that was slightly too big and a grin that wouldn't quit. Arya wore a simple white dress and flowers in her hair, and when Ethan saw her walking toward him across the grass, he felt his chest crack open with emotion. She was beautiful. She was his. She was everything. The ceremony was short and sweet, just close friends and family. And when Caroline pronounced them married, Noah cheered louder than anyone, pumping his fist in the air like his team had just won the championship. At the reception, which was really just a barbecue with a cake and some music, Ethan danced with Noah first, then with his wife. His wife, he couldn't stop thinking it, and later he stood on the porch watching everyone laugh and talk and celebrate, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real, genuine peace. Arya found him there, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. You okay? Yeah, I'm perfect. Liar, you're stressed about something. He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. I'm not stressed. I'm just happy. And I forgot what that felt like. She smiled, leaning into his touch. Get used to it. I'm trying. Try harder. He kissed her, slow and soft, and felt the future stretch out before them, uncertain and messy and full of possibility. Ochet. A year later, Ethan stood in the same backyard, watching Noah chase Arya around the grass while she laughed and pretended she couldn't catch him. Her latest checkup had been perfect. Dr. Patel had used words like remission and stable and long-term, and for the first time, Ethan let himself believe them fully. Life wasn't perfect. Arya still had bad days where the exhaustion hit her hard. Noah still struggled sometimes with the fact that he didn't remember his first mom, still asked questions that broke Ethan's heart. Ethan still woke up sometimes in the middle of the night, gripped by the fear that this would all disappear, that he'd lose everything again. But they were managing, together. And maybe that was the point, Ethan thought. Life wasn't about having all the answers or fixing everything or living without fear. It was about showing up, about staying, about choosing each other, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Arya collapsed onto the grass, breathless and grinning, and Noah flopped down beside her. Ethan joined them, lying on his back and staring up at the sky. Dad? Noah said after a moment. Yeah, bud. I'm glad Arya stayed. Ethan reached over and ruffled his hair. Me too. Me three, Arya added, her hand finding Ethan's. They lay there in the grass, the three of them, and Ethan thought about how wrong he'd been all those years ago when he'd decided that protecting yourself meant shutting everyone out. Because the truth was, love wasn't safe.
It never had been.
It was terrifying and unpredictable, and it could break you into 1,000 pieces. But it could also put you back together. It could save you in ways you didn't know you needed saving. And sometimes, if you were brave enough to let someone in, if you were willing to risk the pain for the possibility of something beautiful, it could give you a second chance at the life you thought you'd lost. Ethan squeezed Arya's hand, felt her squeeze back, and let himself believe in forever. Not because he wasn't afraid anymore. He'd probably always carry some level of fear, some awareness of how fragile happiness could be, but because he'd learned that some things were worth being afraid for. This messy, imperfect, beautiful life was one of them. And as the afternoon sun filtered through the trees, and Noah's laughter echoed across the yard, and Arya's warmth pressed against his side, Ethan understood something fundamental about being human. We're all broken in some way, all carrying scars from battles we've fought and losses we've endured. The question isn't whether we'll get hurt again. We probably will. The question is whether we'll let fear win, or whether we'll choose love despite the risk. Ethan had chosen love, and it had chosen him back. That was worth everything. He looked at Arya, at the ring on her finger that matched the one on his, at the smile on her face that reached all the way to her eyes. He looked at Noah, at the boy who'd given him a reason to keep going when everything else had fallen apart, who was growing up too fast and not fast enough all at once. This was his family, broken and rebuilt, scarred but healing, imperfect in all the best ways. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. "I love you guys," he said, the words simple but weighted with every ounce of meaning he could pour into them. "Love you too, Dad," Noah said, already distracted by a butterfly landing nearby. "Love you?" Arya echoed, and Ethan heard everything she wasn't saying in those two words, all the gratitude and hope and promise and fear and joy wrapped up together. As the sun continued its slow descent and the shadows lengthened across the grass and the world kept spinning the way it always did, Ethan let himself feel it all. The happiness and the fear, the gratitude and the grief, the past and the present and the future all existing in the same moment. And he was okay with that, because that was life. Real, messy, complicated, beautiful life. And he was finally ready to live it.